Namaskar, good evening. You are watching Rajya Sabha television. I'm Smriti Rastogi with News Tonight. Let's begin the bulletin with the top headlines. Huge blow to Vijay Mallya. British court allows enforcement officers can seize the fugitive tycoon's assets in UK to recover the money he owes to 13 Indian banks. Bangalore police identifies 159 properties belonging to the industrialist. Centre asks state and union territories to check incidents of mob lynching triggered by rumours of child lifting. Home Ministry advisory urges close monitoring of social media for early detection and effective measures to counter rumours. Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu applauds the centre's generous hike in the minimum support price for the Kharif crops. Says measure reaffirms the government's resolve to double the farmers' income, will boost production of pulses. Congress-JDS coalition government in Karnataka announces 34,000 crore farm loan waiver in its maiden budget. Farmers whose borrowings don't exceed 2 lakh rupees to get a relief of 25,000. Issues had been a bone of contention between the coalition partners. And Air India changes Taiwan's name to Chinese Taipei on its website. China welcomes the decision, asserts that foreign companies operating in the country must obey its law and respect its territorial integrity. Our top focus tonight, the centre on Thursday asked the states and union territories to check incidents of mob lynching fueled by rumours of child lifting on social media. In an advisory, the Home Ministry has urged the states and union territories to keep a watch for early detection of rumours of child lifting and initiate effective measures to counter them. The states and the union territories have been asked to direct district administrators to identify vulnerable areas and conduct community outreach programs for creating awareness. They also have been told and directed to properly investigate the complaints of child abduction or kidnapping. More than 20 people were lynched over the last 2 months on suspicion of child lifting. The latest being the killing of 5 men in Maharashtra's Dhule district. And the Home Minister Rajnath Singh has said that peace and stability could be brought to Jammu and Kashmir only through an honest, effective and efficient administration. Home Minister Rajnath Singh reviewed the security situation in the state at the high-level meeting attended by Governor N.N. Vohra, National Security Advisor Ajit Doval and top civil and police officials during his first visit to Jammu and Kashmir after the imposition of Governor's rule. Singh also said that the central government was committed to taking all possible measures to bring accountability and transparency in the system. On to some more developments. A UK High Court judge has issued an enforcement order in favour of a consortium of 13 Indian banks seeking to recover funds owed to them by liquor baron Vijay Mallya. The enforcement order gives 13 banks the legal option of entering the properties of Vijay Mallya, who is fighting extradition to India on fraud and money laundering charges. The bank can now enforce the Indian court ruling, freezing his wealth in England and Wales. The order allows the UK High Court enforcement officer to enter the 62-year-old tycoon's properties in London. And back home, the Bangalore police informed a Delhi court that it has identified 159 properties belonging to Vijay Mallya, but has not been able to attach any of them for the Enforcement Directorate's money laundering case relating to FERA violations. Mallya was declared a proclaimed offender by the court on 4th of January for evading its summons in the case. The Enforcement Directorate has sought more time to identify other properties of Mallya which can be attached. And Union Minister Arun Jaitley has elaborated on what the Supreme Court observation in the Delhi government case is in a Facebook post. He said, the judgment elaborates at the length the constitutional philosophy behind the Constitution and reaffirms precisely the text of what the Constitution says. He said it does not add to the powers of the state government or the central government, nor does it any way dilute the same. Jaitley added that it emphasizes at the importance of the elected state government, but Delhi, being a union territory, makes its powers subservient to the central government. He also says there are two obvious indications. Firstly, if Delhi has no police powers, it cannot set up investigative agency to investigate crimes as had been done in the past. Secondly, the Supreme Court has held categorically that Delhi cannot compare itself at par with other states, and therefore any presumption that the administration of the Union Territory cadre of service has been decided in favour of the Delhi government would be wholly erroneous. Jaitley's comments have come in the wake of several versions of the Supreme Court's Wednesday judgment. And ahead of the general elections in Pakistan, the most ambitious project of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is facing dissent in Pakistan. While the corridor is intended to do the boost to the economy of Pakistan, it is only managing to increase the discontent in Balochistan province. Let's take a look at what are the reasons. Dissent is brewing in the Balochistan province of Pakistan over the multi-billion-dollar China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. And ahead of the elections in Pakistan on 25th of July, this issue is taking on political colour. Media reports say, while the project has not generated enough jobs in the region, local residents are complaining against the disruption of normal life and atrocities committed allegedly by the military in the region. The problem is reportedly the most acute in the Gwadar, a volatile region that often experiences protests and violence, which is why the government has deployed the army in the region. Located on the southwestern coast of Balochistan, the Gwadar port is significant for China, which wants to access the Arabian Sea for its exports. Last month, a Balochistan group held protest in front of the Chinese embassy in London on the issue. Free Balochistan movement activists claimed that China is telling Pakistan to relocate Baloch villages that are on the route of CPEC. It also alleged that Pakistan is committing huge human rights violations at the behest of China in the province. The Free Balochistan movement also launched a campaign in other countries, including the United States and Germany, on the corridor. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. And to understand this entire issue better, we'll go across to Mr. Shiv Shankar Mukherjee, former ambassador. Sir, thank you so much for speaking to Rajya Sabha Television. Local people in Pakistan's Balochistan province are protesting against China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. What is this entire issue all about, and why protest against CPEC in Pakistan?
Well, there are a couple of reasons that one can point to. This is a huge project. It's $50 billion. It's all about railroads, roads, and energy. Now, the Pakistan ruling establishment, which is basically the military establishment of Pakistan, is by now almost a client of China. So the terms imposed on Pakistan may not be the kind of terms that are internationally considered as normal terms for joint projects. And the Chinese, and I have watched their operations in Africa when I was serving there, the Chinese have this tendency of bringing everybody, all the labor, technicians, the workers needed, almost all of them seem to be coming from China. So this whole question of the projects providing a lot of jobs for the local people quite often goes by the board, and it's sort of covered up usually by the Chinese political clout and threats and intimidation, more or less. And the second reason is these projects, these huge projects, will naturally face a fundamental requirement, which is land acquisition. And the Chinese, following their pattern of behavior, especially with Pakistan, which, as I said, has become more or less a client state, will want to, just push through land acquisition without any consideration of the norms normally followed in democracies, all about public hearings, compensation, rehabilitation, and so on. So one can imagine as the CPEC has progressed, that there's been a lot of local anger, quite apart from the situation in Balochistan, where there's a movement for self-determination, and there's in fact a movement for autonomy, for self-rule, more or less. So that's one point. The second point is that there is, in mainstream of Pakistan itself, not just in Balochistan, a lot of second thoughts going on. If you see their discussions on TV, there are think tank reports from Pakistan, press reports, which are already questioning the wisdom of taking huge Chinese loans from an economy that's already down in the dumps at rates of interest which are, not at all in any way concessional. In fact, I saw one television debate on the Pakistan TV which compared the 0% rate we've got for the bullet train from Ahmedabad to Mumbai and comparing it with what the Chinese are doing
Mr.
in
Mukherjee,
terms
you
of
mentioned a
their
point.
investment in the CPEC.
Mr.
So
Mukherjee,
given all these...
Mr. Mukherjee just mentioned a
Yes,
point
go ahead.
about the discontent over the resettlement and rehabilitation. So what is the approach of the government there for the resettlement of the communities which are being displaced for the corridor?
Well, we don't know. We really don't know. The point is, I think the main point is that Pakistan is now, to put it bluntly, more or less in hock to China. They're under pressure from the United States. US aid, which used to be liberally given to them in the past, is drying up. So at the moment, Pakistan is between a rock and a hard place. I really think they don't seem to have any option, because the Chinese, they seem to be in the Chinese dragon's embrace far too tightly for them to be able to break loose.
And talking
we can only
about,
see what pans
Mr.
out
Mukherjee,
in the future.
and talking about the Pakistan's economy, will it really help Pakistan's economy? What significance of this project is there on Pakistan's ailing economy?
If you a $50 billion project, which includes huge infrastructure creation in terms of roads, railroads, energy, connectivity, therefore, certainly it ought to help the Pakistani economy. Whether the political and social price that the Pakistanis will have to pay, plus the debt trap that it might fall into, just like Sri Lanka has fallen into with Hambantota port, that is something we will have to see.
And how big a political issue it is, and how important it is to resolve this ahead of the 25th of July elections, which are going to be held in Pakistan?
Well, for Pakistan, it is I think for Pakistan is not only a domestic issue, it is a foreign policy issue. I mean, if the opposition parties in Pakistan make a huge big deal out of opposition to the CPEC, if it becomes a flashpoint in the elections, it may or it may not, and so on. Plus, it may cast a shadow on future Pakistan-China relations when the repayments question comes up, when local opposition to some of the projects comes up. We are looking at the possibility of a messy period ahead in terms of China-Pakistan bilateral relations. And certainly its impact on the domestic political scene as something that could figure pretty largely in the elections that are coming up.
Talking about the Gwadar port, it is a crucial element for the CPAC. Gwadar port is also significant for China, which wants to access the Arabian Sea for the exports. Now, how important is Beijing's role here?
Look, the Gwadar port is, of course, China's access to the warm waters of the Arabian Sea. But it is more than that. It is part of what we in India see as the Chinese very purposeful strategy of not just encircling India, but putting its maritime strength all over not just the West Pacific, but into the Indian Ocean. They already have ports which they more or less control in Myanmar, in Sri Lanka, in the Maldives. They have a naval base now in Djibouti. So right across these straits, through which almost 90% of our trade crosses, in which I think half the world's trade crosses. The Chinese presence, naval presence, its maritime presence, it's being aggressively pushed up by China. It's not just the South China Sea anymore, although that remains a
Mr.
very
Mukherjee,
strong
I would
focus.
like to button here.
So this port, quite apart from...
A very quick answer on what impact this entire situation is likely to have on India.
We'll just have to wait and watch. We have already expressed our opposition to the CPEC. Quite apart from our reservations on the Belt and Road Initiative overall, as far as the CPEC is concerned, our fundamental objection is that it goes through territory which is a sovereign part of India. And therefore, the CPEC, as far as we are concerned, infringes on our sovereignty, because what we call Pakistan occupied Kashmir, through which the CPEC is passing, is Indian sovereign territory. Now that is something that is more or less non-negotiable as far as India's political stance is concerned.
All right.
All right,
Mr. Mukherjee.
In that sense...
thank you so much for giving us a wider perspective on that latest development from Pakistan, where the dissent is brewing in the Balochistan province of Pakistan over the multi-billion-dollar CPEC corridor. And it holds an importance because of it being before the elections, which are scheduled in Pakistan on 25th of July. Now, how the issue is likely to take a political color or not, this is something which has to be watched out for. At the moment, we'll head into a very short break. More news and updates on the other side. Stay with us.
Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I am Vishal Dahiya, and this week we will take a look at indigenously developed light combat aircraft Tejas.
Tejas has got a big place as far as numbers and in the low capability is concerned in the Air Force scheme of things.
If you have to actually encourage innovation, if you have to encourage indigenization, you have to accept the aircraft initially with certain shortfalls and then keep improving upon it.
We need to have an international level of production line, 30 planes per year for the next 10 years to make it work.
Welcome back. You are watching News Tonight. Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu on Thursday praised the government's decision to hike the MSP of the Kharif crops. He also appreciated the government's resolve to double the farmers' income by 2022. Addressing a session at the Central Island Agricultural Research Institute in Port Blair, the Vice President stressed on the need to streamline the procurement process and the PDS network so that the farmers derive maximum benefit. He added that other income-enhancing measures also need to be taken to mitigate agrarian distress, especially of the small and marginal farmers. Urging the scientific community to have regular interaction with the farmers, Vice President said a good synergy between the research institutes, farmers, and the local administration is crucial for the development of the farm sector. In Andaman, the Vice President also visited the cellular jail where the valiant freedom fighters were meted out most cruel and inhuman treatment by the British. He visited the solitary confinement cell of Veer Savarkar and paid tribute to the great freedom fighter. Built in 1906, the jail acquired the name cellular as the entire structure is made up of individual cells meant for solitary confinement. The jail holds many horrific stories of our independence heroes who were incarcerated in this jail. On to some more news. Adhering to the 1949 agreement with China, India will refer to the Taiwan airport as Chinese Taipei Airport. The Indian gesture is understood to be a signal of growing understanding with China on core issues. Beijing has welcomed the decision of India.
National carrier Air India's website now calls Taiwan as Chinese Taipei. An airline spokesperson said this is in line with instructions from the Ministry of External Affairs. Various airlines worldwide identify Taiwan as a separate region.
Air India's decision to rename the destination of Taiwan as Chinese Taipei is entirely consistent with international norms and our own position on Taiwan since 1949.
China has welcomed Air India's decision. In April, the Civil Aviation Authority of China reportedly sent out letters to various foreign airlines asking them to change the way Taiwan is referred to in their websites.
But I have very explicitly given you our position that what they have done is entirely consistent with international norms, which explains your observation. And also it is in line with our own position on Taiwan, which we have consistent position since 1949.
Air India has only one direct flight to Shanghai besides flights to Hong Kong. While it does not have flights to Chinese Taipei, it has a code share with Air China. Carriers like Singapore Airlines, Japan Airlines and Air Canada have also changed the description of Taiwan on their websites. 19 countries have given the status of independent nation status to Taiwan. Over 100 countries including India do have separate relations with Taiwan. But they don't give Taiwanese representatives ambassador status, but as a trade representative. China views Taiwan, an island which has been independent since 1950, as a rebel region that must be reunited with the mainland by force if necessary. Taiwan calls itself a democratic, self-ruled country in East Asia. Akhilesh Suman's report for Rajya Sabha TV.
And in its pursuit for the manned mission, the Indian Space Research Organization on Thursday successfully carried out a flight test for a newly designed crew escape system. The system is meant for saving lives of astronauts in an exigency. In a release, the ISRO said the first pad abort test demonstrated the safe recovery of the crew module in case of any exigency at the launch pad. It said after a smooth 5-hour countdown, the crew escape system along with the simulated crew module lifted off at 7 a.m. from its pad at the Satish Dhawan Space Center at Sriharikota. It was the first in a series of tests to ascertain the trustworthiness and efficiency of the crew escape system. And now the news from Karnataka, where the Chief Minister H.D. Kumaraswamy has announced a crop loan waiver scheme worth 34,000 crore rupees in the first budget of the Congress-JDS government. According to the scheme, all defaulted crop loans of farmers up to 31st December 2017 up to 2 lakh rupees per family will be waived off. The total size of the budget stands at 2,13,734 crore rupees, with 150 crore rupees earmarked for agriculture development, 15,825 crore rupees for 6 elevated corridors across Bengaluru, 50 crore rupees have been allocated for rejuvenation of Belandur Lake in Bengaluru. The state government has announced a hike in the petrol prices of 1.14 rupees, while diesel has become dearer by 1.12 rupees. Tax on liquor has also been raised by 4%. And now the news from the national capital. A day after the Supreme Court's verdict on the power tussle between the Delhi government and Lieutenant Governor, Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal has sought time for a meeting with Lieutenant Governor Anil Baijal. In a letter to Baijal, Kejriwal said all stakeholders must work towards implementing the apex court's order in letter and spirit, and the LG's approval would now not be required on any matter. Earlier, the officers refused to follow the Delhi government's order of withdrawing powers of transfer from the LG. The directive was introduced by the Delhi government hours after the Supreme Court verdict on Wednesday. The Delhi government has also sought legal opinion after bureaucrats refused to comply with the Delhi government's directive. Deputy Chief Minister Manish Sisodia has said that the refusal to comply with the government's order amounted to contempt of court. He also appealed to the officers to abide by the Supreme Court judgment.
जो 3 मुद्दे हैं, पुलिस, लॉ एंड ऑर्डर, पब्लिक ऑर्डर एंड लैंड, इन 3 के ऊपर एलजी साहब का कंट्रोल है और बाकी सारी चीज़ों पे दिल्ली सरकार की एग्जीक्यूटिव पावर्स हैं। तो मैं सभी जितने भी इसमें स्टेक होल्डर्स हैं सबसे अपील करना चाहता हूँ, निवेदन करना चाहता हूँ कि हमें इस ऑर्डर को इम्प्लीमेंट करना चाहिए, इसके लेटर एंड स्पिरिट में इम्प्लीमेंट करना चाहिए और सबको मिलके अब दिल्ली के विकास के लिए काम करना चाहिए।
रात को ही चीफ सेक्रेटरी से लिखित में मिल गया है कि वो कोर्ट के आदेश को नहीं मानेंगे। रीज़न वही दिया है कि MHA का नोटिफिकेशन अभी क्वेश्चन नहीं हुआ है, लेकिन MHA का नोटिफिकेशन, MHA के किसी बाबू का इस तरह से नोटिफिकेशन इशू करना, वो सुप्रीम कोर्ट की संवैधानिक पीठ ने जब पूरी व्यवस्था दे दी है उसके बाद तो वो इन्फेक्शियस हो जाता है। लेकिन अगर अफसर बार बार ये कह रहे हैं कि हम नहीं मानेंगे तो ये तो खुलेआम अवमानना है।
Delhi's Patiala House Court granted anticipatory bail to Congress leader Shashi Tharoor in the case of his wife Sunanda Pushkar's death. Tharoor was granted bail on a personal bond of 1 lakh rupees on the condition that he can neither tamper with the evidence nor leave the country without the court's permission. In his plea for anticipatory bail, Tharoor had submitted that the charge sheet in the case was filed and the special investigation team had categorically stated that the probe was concluded and his custodial interrogation was not required. The RBI deadline to entities prohibiting them from providing services in relation to cryptocurrencies ends today. The RBI had in its April 6th circular has prohibited entities regulated by it from providing any service in relation to virtual currencies, including those of transfer or receipt of money in accounts relating to the purchase or sale of virtual currencies. The Supreme Court too had refused to stay the RBI circular. Cryptocurrencies are digital currencies in which encryption techniques are used to regulate the generation of the currency units and verify the transfer of funds, operating independently of a central bank. And Amarnath Yatra in South Kashmir was on Thursday suspended from Jammu due to inclement weather. However, a batch of 1,798 pilgrims who were stopped at Udhampur from leaving from the Pahalgam base camp in view of the inclement weather conditions were allowed to move to Pahalgam. On July 3rd, 3 pilgrims and a helper were killed and 7 others injured in a landslide that hit the Brarimag rail patri stretch of the trek from Baltal to the cave shrine. The 60-day yatra is scheduled to conclude on 26th of August. And that's all we have for you in this edition of News Tonight. But before we go, let's take you to the monsoon updates from across the country. Thank you for watching.